In my last video on this car, I took care of all of the mechanical sort of maintenance problems this car had. Obviously a basic service, but front wheel bearings, new tires all around, stopped some leaks, bunch of bushings, connections, stuff like that. It's all good. This car's driving really nicely apart from needing wheel alignment. Of course, now that means we can start looking at some more fun stuff, like this lift kit. This is the lift kit in question. This is the 2-inch lift kit for the first and second generation Subaru Forester from HRG Offroad over in America. It comes with everything you need, 2-inch spacers front and back. It also comes with the trailing arm spacers to make sure your rear axle is nice and centered, as well as some new hardware and new camber bolts, which you'll need on the rear to get the camber right. The front suspension on these Foresters comes with the camber bolts from factory, so you can set it up how you want. The rear doesn't, so you need them as well. If you're in America, this is probably your best bet. If you're in Australia, SubieLiftOz does a similar kit. That's probably your best bet. The only reason I went with this one is because they had a Black Friday sale, which means it was cheaper, even with the shipping. Otherwise, probably would have gone SubieLiftOz. But this car is a budget build, so I need to stick to that. I'm going to start on the front because I think it's a bit more simple and I want to get my head around it before I start doing the trailing arm spacers. And touch wood, should be pretty simple. If you're curious about this lift, this is the Autolift 3000 by Autolift. They're actually from the Czech Republic, and this thing is worth every single penny of the $1,000 that it cost me. It is so much safer. It is so easy and quick to set up, super well built. I think the company was actually founded by an ex-Skoda engineer, which in the 80s and 90s is probably not a good thing, but nowadays that's very high praise. And you get so much clearance. This thing is already higher than I could ever get it on jack stands, and it's on the 3rd lowest setting right now. So yeah, it's pretty good. All right, first step, got to get everything off the strut. So I'm going to remove this wheel speed sensor bracket, whatever you want to call it, wheel speed sensor cable. I don't know, man. Next, got to remove this brake line. The instructions say to cut this thing, and it kind of goes against my instincts, but the alternative is kinking this and removing this and doing that a couple times to uninstall and reinstall. And I actually think this is safer, so I'm just going to cut it. Just bend it out of the way. You don't need to cut both sides. The 2 main bolts holding this thing in, they're 19mm. And just take note of the direction they're facing. This top one, the camber one, will only come in from the back. The front one, put in the opposite way. Not sure if that's factory or if something I just decided to do like 2 years ago when I worked on this car, but either way, should be fine. Tell you something nice about Australia, one of the many things. This is what pretty much every car looks like, even after 20 years. Because we don't have any snow, mate. Even like early 90s Japanese cars, the ones that don't have the best rust proofing, they will usually still look like this. With, you know, whatever, 250,000 kilometers. Pretty much the only rusted up, seized bolts and nuts on this car are in the exhaust system, which I'm going to change anyway. Spoilers. Last thing I'm going to do is remove these 3 12mm nuts holding the strut in the tower, and we can get started on lifting it. Just remembered I have electricity. Yeah, mate. It's pretty nice quality. Looks good, strong welds, all that. All we have to do, chuck it on with the L facing the rear of the car when it's installed, which will be this way. We've got our strut there, and the back of the car will be this direction, so that's it. Each spacer comes with its own nuts, because obviously you have to reuse the ones at the top. Make sure you get these 3 nuts snugged up before you install the strut. Probably won't be able to fit a torque wrench in here, but just give it a good one of them. About 2 she'll be right. I think that's the correct measurement there. Now, you'll probably be able to get it out without removing the sway bar end link. But if you're like me, you probably will have to remove it to get it back on, just because that extra height we've added makes it that much harder to get into place. There you go. Bit more movement. And back in. Can't really find a definite torque spec on these, but I've read 20 Newton meters, which is probably about right. I don't know. So as I rotate this bolt, you'll be able to see camber comes out and comes back in. Now I want it as in as possible, so as negative as possible. Generally, I don't know if this car is the same, but a lot of suspensions will add a little bit of positive camber as the suspension releases. And basically the lift kit is permanently releasing it. So I want as much negative as possible to compensate for that. Which looks like about there. And if we go on the back of the bolt, I'm hoping you can see that there's a vertical marking. And that, when that is upright, the strut is going to be at its most negative camber. You can see it going positive. If I bring it back to where that marking is vertical like that, I go this way, it starts going positive again. So I believe I want it just like that. When you tighten that one, you want to tighten it by the nut so you don't move the bolt. $175 Newton meters, which again seems about right, I guess. Bloody hell. You could go camping in that wheel arch. Shoe test, big fail. For the rear of the car, pretty much a rinse and repeat of the front with the addition of those trailing arm spacers, which I'll get to in a little bit. But I'm going to start by removing this connection on the sway bar link, just so it doesn't get under a lot of stress like it did at the front. Next, I'm going to remove the 3 bolts that hold the trailing arm in place. These are 17 millimeters. Same as last time, got to remove this brake hose. Like the front, we got 2 19 millimeter bolts. Then just move over to the inside. We've got this strut cover here. You pop it off, just use some trim removal tools or a flathead screwdriver will come straight off. And then the 3 nuts on the top, just like the front, and the strut will come out. For the rear struts, we're doing the same as the front, fitting our spacer before it goes back on the car. I've given the struts and springs a very crap black paint job. I will touch it up a bit more. I really don't care about runs or fingerprints or dust or anything like that. I just wanted the color to be black because I thought yellow and red with a green spacer was gonna look pretty terrible. So now it's black, that's good. The R or L, whatever side you're doing, that letter needs to face the inside of the car, which is gonna be in this orientation. Something to note with this kit, these are the camber bolts. I've just spent about 20 minutes off camera doing the other side trying to get it in. And what I'm finding is the cam is just a little bit too big. I'm going to just sand the tiniest bit out of this hole here because I'm smashing this thing with a hammer, and as you can see, I've only gotten it just about halfway in. And then even once it's in, good luck trying to rotate it. That'll work with a bit of hammer encouragement. Get it to sort of balance on top of your hub, carrier, whatever you want to call it. This makes it really easy to do with one person. It doesn't have to be fully tight yet, we're just getting it snug. Now we need to start jacking up the rear brake hub so we can get it in line with the bolts here. Finally got one of these bolts through after about half an hour, and I found what worked was loosening the top nuts a lot, like so that there's about 2 centimeters of play. And then you just wrestle around with the jack, angles, hammers, screwdrivers, whatever you can get your hands on. And eventually you will get there. Right, this is where we've got to install the trailing arm spacer. And this is really difficult. At least I found it really difficult. That needs to go there. Line everything up. I actually don't really know how the hell you can do this without like cross-threading or doing something. It's just so hard to get the bolt started. Sooner you guys subscribe, sooner I will have a hoist, and then you'll be able to see what I'm doing. So I'll just show you. You do have to compress the spring a lot to get it to line up. I want to do this with the factory jack that came with the car, just so you know you can, if you're using your trolley jack to hold the car up, which I don't recommend. But there you go. Of course, make sure you've got everything tightened up the way it should be. I did 25 Newton meters on the front because I couldn't find an actual spec, and I've since misplaced my small torque wrench, so we're just going for a twist. To finish off the process, I decided to cut a couple inches off the back bumper to give the car some extra clearance. I also wanted to do this to get rid of the exhaust outlet notch on the left side because I'm moving the whole pipe higher to come out of the bumper itself, also for clearance reasons. Everything is getting painted in a future episode. Then I just 3D printed a little trim piece with a metal insert for the exhaust pipe to tidy everything up, and bolted the bumper to the wheel arch of the car to make up for cutting off some of the mounting points. This lift kit was well worth the purchase, and it took me about 4 hours to install. It's doable yourself at home as long as you have enough jacks and axle stands to compress the suspension and lift the car at the same time. The hardest part is lining up the trailing arm spacer bolts, so overall it's not too bad. I'll see you guys for the next episode where I do some sound related upgrades, both inside and out. Cheers!